super famous would mean tapes of other men existed. Men of power, men of substantial wealth, perhaps not household names. Epstein told many people he was a money manager, but records show he was not a particularly good one. His former lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, had a theory about that.
I think he had some things over some other people. I think he had some extortion over some people.
Right. That would explain everything. Gloria Allred's here. She represents 20 of Epstein's victims. We appreciate you being back with us, ma'am. Thank you. I know I don't want to ask you to talk about attorney-client and privileged information, but I want to get this. Just hypothetically, have you ever heard of a secret so salacious as tapes of Bill Clinton and Prince Andrew having sex and existing for almost 20 years and something like that being kept successfully secret?
That would be surprising if that were the case. As to Ms. Ransom, apparently there are a number of reports that she said to a reporter that she had invented that story. She did not provide the sex tapes, which allegedly she had seen, to a reporter who asked for them from the New York Post. And so since she appears to have retracted what she said, I don't think we could rely on it. Now, that doesn't mean the tapes don't exist or do exist, but it does mean that there does not appear to be corroboration for what she said, even from her.
As you've studied the Epstein case for so long, have you been able to connect the dots of where Epstein was getting all this money from and why all of these, not only sort of the most powerful people in the world, but why others were willing to be around him, were willing to give him money to manage? Have you been able to piece that together?
Well, I mean, Alan Dershowitz, whom you just showed, who did represent the defendant Epstein, really appears to suggest that his client was blackmailing, extorting, which is very interesting and would tie together a lot of information. I do think that there were some photos. I don't know whether there were tapes. This is, of course, a great concern to any victims who would not want inappropriate photos of them, especially if they were victims of sex trafficking, which many of them were when they were underage, sex trafficking by Mr. Epstein. They wouldn't want those photos and or tapes, if they exist, to be released. But my point is, right now, there does not appear to be any public evidence that there were tapes of Trump, President Clinton, or Prince Andrew that are there. So it doesn't mean there isn't any evidence, doesn't mean there is, but there is none that is publicly confirmed.
So Sarah Ransom settled a lawsuit with Jeffrey Epstein back in the day, as I'm sure you're well aware. This was her talking about Ghislaine Maxwell. Take a listen.
And I was not the only girl on that island. There was a constant stream of girls being raped over and over and over again. And yes, Ghislaine must die in prison.
So Maxwell's in prison. Epstein's dead. Justice, though, requires that other people who were involved in this be held responsible. And I'm wondering if in your opinion, justice has been served and that everybody who did bad things has been held responsible, or there's still others that need to be held to account?
Well, since I don't represent all of the many, many victims that there are, I can't say whether or not there are others who have not been accountable. We have helped to make accountable some of the rich and the powerful and the famous who have hurt some of the victims and who were introduced to the victims by Jeffrey Epstein. So I can't go farther than that, but there is some civil accountability in some confidential settlements. But that's not complete accountability, because the only one who has been prosecuted criminally is Ms. Maxwell. And of course, Mr. Epstein was being prosecuted, but then reportedly he committed suicide while he was in custody. So there never was a trial in that case. As to the defamation case brought against Mr. Maxwell, against Ms. Maxwell by Virginia Giuffre, that case was settled, so that case never went to trial. Yeah. Of course, what's being released right now are a lot of names. There are a lot of accusations, but we don't know for certain. We're just speculating as to whether, for example, those tapes actually exist.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.